guys, it's Kaysie Lackey for Innovative Sugarworks, and today I'm going to show you how to make a sugar peony using our awesome new cutter sets. So the set comes with 7 different cutters. We're going to utilize all of them today. Depending on the style of peony you're doing, you can use less if you want. But there's also a couple of other things you'll need to do them in my style. So you'll need one of these Wilton kind of protection mats. Not for keeping your petals from drying out, but to actually thin your petals with. So this is my new favorite thing. And then also the other thing I love using for peonies, because peonies are actually a very round cupped flower and they're not as frilly as people think they are. So I like to utilize these silicone half sphere molds. You'll need 4 different sizes. The D55, or sorry, the D005, the 004, 003 and 002. I got these at New York Cake. They actually have really good pricing on them, and just get a few, and then you can make awesome bonbons with them too. And so the other things you'll need are gum paste. For this one, I'm doing a coral, so I'm kind of starting with a peachy orange, and I go ahead and I ombre my colors from lightest to darkest. It saves you a lot of time dusting later if you can go ahead and kind of spread out and do 3 different colors. So just know that for this size peony, you want 3 different colors of gum paste, kind of ombre, lightest to darkest. You'll need your half sphere molds, you'll need your cutters, and some wires. So we're gonna go get started. Go. All right, so to start off making our center for the peony, let's show you guys a finished one right here. So that's what we're gonna be making. You wanna start with some pale green gum paste and just kind of pull off 3 equal sized pieces. I tend to go fairly small with these, so when you roll in the ball, it's roughly the size of, like, it fits inside one of these squares on the on a self-healing mat. That's my gauge for size. And then you're gonna roll it into a ball and then twist it into a teardrop. So you've got your little teardrop shape. And then bend it over your thumb, kind of curve it in like a comma, like such. And then you want to use 26 gauge wire, 26 gauge white. You will do kind of a more open hook on it, like that. Dip this in your egg white or your gum glue, whichever you prefer. And then you're going to go in from the bottom. So if almost not quite in the middle, but just right there, kind of holding it like that. And then you're gonna scoop and push. And then you want it to sit slightly open. So you don't want it to be completely vertical like that. You actually wanna pull it that way. So it's kind of at 10 o'clock. If you were looking at a clock like that, it's pointing towards 10. And then go ahead and kind of smooth it down onto the base. Like that. And then grab your wheel tool and you're just tooling the inside. So the inside is going to be the curve of the comma. And then you're just going to do 1 line all the way down like that. And then I always kind of go back and repoint. I always think that peony centers look like that mouth in Star Wars that like eats people in the 3rd one after Jabba the Hutt. That's what I always imagine they are. I'm going to get you. And so from here, make 3 to 4. I usually always do 3 because I think 4 clusters of 4 looks weird. It's just a personal preference. So you want to make 3 of these and let them dry. You want them to get pretty much dry because if you try to squish them together and assemble them when they're soft, you risk pushing them off the wires. So I tend to make these and let them dry overnight. But for this one, I'm just going to kind of show you guys how to do that. Once it's dry, you can see I've got this one here. You want to tape them together with a little tiny bit of space between them, like that. So tape in 3, like that. And then you'll add your stamens. I just use these, the pre-made yellow lily stamens. Let's see, these guys come in a pack. You need about half a pack per peony, is what I always say. And then I just pull them off. I'll take that half and I'll divide it into thirds. And as you can see what I've done here, I'll actually take this third and I'll kind of shove it between the 2 tape it down, tape it down, tape it down. And then the fun part is just kind of pull them around and fluff them out. And you can have them, some peonies, the stamens are really, really long and sometimes they're really, really close. It's really up to you. If you're doing a really big open peony without a lot of smaller petals, I tend to put more stamens and make them wider, just because it takes up that awkward and negative space where the wire is attached. But that is how you make a peony center, kind of Cliff Notes version. So let's move on to the fun bit, which is the petals. All right. So to get started, we're working on our first layer too. So you can see over here the 3 petal shapes we're using. It's the 3 smallest petals, and you're gonna do 5 of each petal. You might not necessarily use all 5 of each because that's 15 petals, just of the little ones. But I always say when I'm making peonies, it's kind of like make 5, get the 6th one free, because you usually have enough leftover petals from assembling to have a 6th flower with all the kind of ones that you're like, oh, I only used 4, I only used 3. There's not a set number because every peony is kind of like its own individual person that speaks to you and says, I need a petal here, I need one there, at least in my world. So yeah, but we're starting with the lightest color of Gumpaste, of our ombre kind of coral. And we're gonna push that in there. Where did my rolling pin go? Oh, there it is. And then once again, kind of start to work it, and then long, smooth strokes. And you want to try to get pretty thin with a peony. Not so thin that it will wrinkle a lot, but I always say you want to clearly see, if you look like there's the vein will look darker than the surrounding paste. That's how you know it's the right thinness, and you want to go as even as you can all the way through. And so then flip it out. And then I'm going to show using this middle cutter here because it's got a right and a left side, as does this first one. So these guys, right and left, this one, it doesn't matter. I say that because the more random you can make a peony, the better they look. So when you have something like this, you want to do, I do 3 the right way. Okay. And then I'll flip it and do 2 the other way, because that way it just makes for a more random pattern. So anytime you see one of the cutters, it's usually just these 2 and then one on the final there that can kind of go either way and be very different. I always flip them. That's just a personal thing. You don't have to, but I think it little tiny step makes a huge difference. So we're gonna go ahead and pull those out. A little thin on the end, but we'll make it work. And then you want to use 28 gauge wire for these to wire them. So dipping it in your egg white. Once again, I like to hold it between my thumb and my middle finger. And then I just thread that wire about halfway down. Like so. And then I'll repeat. Again, and I always cut and wire all my petals like one round and I go. It saves some time in my world. Like that, but I'm not gonna bore you guys by wiring all those, so I'll just start with those 2. Move these guys over here. And so then from here, I'm gonna grab my fun little Wilton storage mat. I'm gonna put these in with the vein side up. Because a lot of times when you try to thin the petal of these, they'll ruffle, and I don't like my peonies to be super ruffly. I like them to be thin, but I want to control the ruffle myself. So I'll put them between the 2 sheets of plastic. So you see it's got 2 sheets of plastic and then the texture. Between the 2 sheets of plastic. And this is just a large cell stick. You can use a rolling pin too, but all I'm going to do is just kind of sit here and rub back and forth on the edge. So you see that gets it nice and thin, really, really thin, and it randomizes the petal even more. So you see that's the shape we started with, and that's what we got. This one will be a slightly different shape. They always are. And so that just gives you even more variety with your petals and nice thin edges. So if you're like, oh, I didn't quite roll it thin enough, you can actually kind of sit here and push the whole thing slightly thinner. But then from here, this is actually a hibiscus veiner. I like this one for peonies. I feel like the vein is nice and soft and subtle, and I really like it from that. This is from a Geo Sugar Art. I know she's got a peony one too, but I like the hibiscus. I'm a weirdo. And so once again, put the vein side up. And I just very lightly vein these guys. I'm not looking for a lot of texture, just something that's gives it something. Like such, so you can see. And then I'm grabbing the smallest of my hemisphere molds. So this is the 005. And all I'm gonna do is kind of lay these guys in there. I'll push the edges in first and try to attach the edges so it doesn't wrinkle too much. And then I'll just push the whole thing in there, kind of with my fingers. If you get a wrinkle that you don't like, you can always use a ball tool to kind of tool it back together. But I'm just going for something that gives it that kind of really cupped appearance. So once again, vein side down, pop it in there. Kind of try to get the edges attached a little bit. If the edges are attached, it won't wrinkle as much because it stretches, usually. If you go really, really thin, it's gonna wrinkle more. It's the one thing you're like, okay, so there's pluses and minuses, but I don't mind the wrinkles. Just wanna be sure it's pushed all the way in there. And so then you're gonna repeat that same step on all 3 petals, 5 of each with the 28 gauge wire. Same thinning and veining, same step on all 5. You should have 15 petals when you're done. And all of those go in the 005. Once you've got those 15, then we'll switch to the next darkest color of Gumpaste and the next size up in the cutters. So we'll do that when we get back. So we're working on our second layer now. And as you see, these two, unlike the first layer, so these are our second layer cutters. I call it like the flame and the cloven hoof. They don't really differ from right to left, so you don't have to worry about doing like 3 one way and 3 the other. I think this layer you don't have to do any sort of flipping if you want to. But the same thing, you want to do 5 and 5 on the 28 gauge wire. Okay. Once again, going about halfway up. Like such. Using my favorite toy again. And you can see we've gone one shade darker. Oh, I put those in the vein side. I always like to have the vein side up so I don't accidentally smush my vein out. So that kind of reminds me, like, don't touch here. And if like pieces get pressed together, I don't care. I think it looks cool. I want it to be as random as I possibly can get it. Like that again. You'll vein that guy. So once again, vein side up. Same hibiscus mold. Vein it lightly. And so then for this one, we're going up to the 004 hemisphere cup for both of them. So they both go in the same size. And so once again, with these guys, I actually kind of pre-fold them because that'll get close. So you can kind of pre-fold it, bend the wire to fit the cup, and then just once again, just kind of trying to get it flat-ish. So you've just got that nice round cup thing, but little things like that I think look really nice on the final flower because that gives you a ruffle that doesn't look awkward. And then one more time, vein side up, lightly vein, rip. These go in a lot easier because of the way the flame is shaped. You don't have to do quite so much finagling. Like that. And then once again, you'll repeat 5 of each petal and then let them sit in here and dry. And then you're going to move on to your darkest Gumpaste color for the next 2 petals. All right, so moving on to the final layer, we're gonna go to our darkest Gumpaste. I've got 2 petals already ready to go for you. Same process as the previous layers. The only difference is that on this larger petal, we're gonna go up to 26 gauge wire, just because it's a heavier petal, so you want a little bit more strength and structure to it. As you can see with our 6th layer petal, it can be a lefty or a righty, so it's up to you if you wanna use it either direction. This one, you don't have to worry about that. But it's the same thing of rolling it out, cutting, veining. The only difference, I do 6 of each of these petals. That's just once again for the extra petals to do your make 5 peonies, get 1 free. And the outer petals are the ones that tend to break the most, so it's always good to have extras just in case you break one. And then so from here, we're using 2 different size hemisphere molds for that. So for the 6th layer petal, which is our, I see it kind of looks like a mitten, we're going to use the 003 size. And then everything else is the same. So it's just kind of popping that guy in there. The bigger the petals, the more they're gonna wanna wrinkle. So it's really kind of trying to get it stuck to the edges so that it stretches a little bit and you don't get as many wrinkles. But these are a little bit easier to get your hands into to get them nice and neat. So like that, you'll do 6 of those. And then for the largest petal, which you don't always use, if you're doing kind of a smaller peony, because you'll see when we're done with this one, this guy's massive. It fits in like both my hands like that, and I've got big hands. You don't always use this outer layer. So sometimes I'll stop with this layer. I'll stop with the 6th layer and I won't do the 7th layer. It's a judgment call on how big you want your peonies to be. I want the biggest peony ever. And so then same thing, kind of attach those guys. Be a little bit more careful since this wire is more rigid. Just even that subtle, like 2 gauges down, it doesn't want to bend as much. So sometimes if you try to go really hard, it'll pop through. So always just be gentle. Ta-da. And then you want to let the petals dry for at least 4 hours. You can go overnight, but I like to assemble mine when they're still a little bit soft. So I call it leather hard. It's a clay term. To where they're slightly flexible, but they hold their shape completely. I find that that helps with breakage, and they also will nest together and arrange better. And it gives you a more natural look and feel. So let these guys dry for about 4 hours, and then we'll assemble our peony. Hooray! All right. So now that our petals are kind of leather hard, so you can see as I squeeze them, they do still give a little bit. They won't break, but they'll still completely hold their cup shape. When I'm starting these, I start with 3 of the mitten petal, which is this shape. That's the one I always start with. It's the smallest of the cutters, and I find that it sits really well on the inside. So that's where I start. There really is no set way to assemble. The other thing I look for is I'm trying to find the ones that are the most cupped. So like if I'm looking at my 5 petals that I have here, that guy's more open and that guy's more open, so I'll take those 2 out and use them for outer layers, and I'll use those 3 first. And then you'll want to pick them up, bend them back slightly, and go right at the base where the stamens meet. And so it should, because we use those hemisphere molds, it should curve over the inside, giving you a nice cup shape. And then you can start with I'm using half width white floral tape again. And I start taping up and grab a second one. Bend it back and go ahead and bend them both back. And you see, so that's a left-handed glove. This is a right-handed glove. So that's where you get that little bit of difference from switching your cutter back and forth. So doing it one side and then the other. So I'll go and get all 3 of those in so you get a nice closed center. You can always open it more once you're done. So if you wanted it to not be that closed, you just pull the petals back. But I love having that option of having it really tight and really closed. And then I will tape down. You don't have to even be neat about it. I leave gaps. But I found if you're making peonies and you stay taping the top, the petals don't lay right. So every layer, once you're done with it, tape all the way down to the bottom. It just will give you uses more foil tape, but it gives you a better shape and a better hold in the end. And so then from here, it's just kind of picking which ones you want. I usually will go for the one with the 2 fingers. Once again, trying to go really tight with the base. But I'll randomize it. So I'll grab like a 2-fingered one first, and then when I do the next one, I'll do the little hot glove. And then maybe I'll grab another one of the fingers. It's just I try not to use the same petal next to each other twice. And you're doing 4 to 5 this round. So that's my 4th. I think I'm gonna end up doing 5 because I'm just kind of seeing, I'm looking for the spacing and trying to decide what looks good. So I think 5 is gonna go really well with this one. And then you, come here, you. So that's my second layer, and from here you can kind of sit and adjust and kind of move them in and out from each other and say, okay, I want it more open, I want it more closed. It's just kind of letting it speak to you. And then you can decide if you want any more petals. You might say, hey, I'm really happy with the shape that this is. Or you might just want to put 1 or 2 more petals on there. It's completely up to you and what your peony is saying. It's kind of like a dahlia in that way. Dahlias always say that they kind of talk to you. I feel like I need 1 more petal here and like maybe 1 there. So let's take a look-see. Ooh, you would go really nicely there. Nope, you're too short. And so you see how that one, it's so far beneath the other ones that I'm not going to use that one. That was one of the mitten ones that we used as the first layer. So usually I've got a couple of those left over. But sometimes they're longer than others. Yeah, you look nice. But see, then I put that one there and I kind of like rearrange and I'm like, oh, that's actually all it needs. But I have a hard time saying no. There's always room for 1 more petal. But what I'm going for is just trying to keep a rounded shape to them. But you can move your petals, you can adjust them fairly easily. And if you need to, if you look at the bottom, like this last one I put on there, I didn't have the wire all the way at the base. That's okay, because I was more trying to get the height that I needed. And especially at this station or this point of the flower building, you won't see that wire later. So if you're like, oh, but I want, that petal looks good, but I need the height, it's totally okay to pull it away from the center a bit. What I'm going for is you want to try to have them all at the same point. A lot of times when I see people make peonies, they end up with wires going from here to here, and there's just a lot of space between them. It's trying to keep them as tight to the top, but you can go out this way, if that makes sense. So now, so you see we've got all these leftover petals. You could guesstimate, but I would always rather have the extras. So now we're gonna go to our next layer. So move into our next darkest color. Once again, we've got 10 petals. And same theory, same process of I'm trying not to put the same petal next to each other. So I start with my little flame, my flame looking petal. And then I'll just kind of start building. I'm just going back and forth. So you can see these are tight to the base again. And it's okay, you see how this top layer is kind of coming over that layer? I actually think that looks nice. So sometimes things just happen and you're like, oh, that looks great. Just roll with it. You got a lot of freedom with peonies. But it's once again, so you see, like, don't pull it down like that to attach it. I want to keep it up like this. Just kind of keep going. And I try to keep this one all as one layer. Since it's only 10 petals, I usually don't use all 10. I usually use 7 to 8. And it's just kind of to find the ones that work. And then I just ran out of tape, so I'm gonna grab another piece, but I always tape on a little bit to add more tape into it. Then yeah, so one more petal, I'm gonna put it here because that's the side that's not looking kind of symmetrical to me. And I want one of these guys. Get on there. Stay where I put you. When you yell at the flowers, they tend to do what you tell them to. Sometimes. There we go. So I'm always just kind of checking to make sure I like the shape that it's taking on. That looks good to me. And once I'm happy, like I'm really happy with how that layer looks, except for that. So yeah, kind of flipping them inside outside, just readjusting where they sit. But then once you're done, once again, tape all the way down to lock in that layer. And then we're ready for our outer layers. So the outer layers, you don't mix the petals. There's such a variance in size between the two that one layer is definitely shorter than the other because we put them in the different sphere sizes. So it's going for the smaller ones first. And you've got 6 of them, but once again, you don't have to use all 6, and you can do what I did if I just nested it underneath just to make a better transition. Let's just kind of building that guy in. Go back where I had you, thank you. And so you see, sometimes I'll actually sit there and I'll kind of like smush them together because peonies, when they're buds, are like perfect little balls. So the way I think about it, if I can get it to be a spherical shape when I'm building it out, it'll look great when I go to fluff it. Because sometimes you start to work on them and then they get really open and they're just hard to manipulate. And one more. Okay. So you can see with this, like even with that last layer of 5 that we did, so I had 1 leftover petal, you could end there. That's a great size peony. I would call that a medium, but I want to do a big peony. So from here, I'm going to go to my last layer, which is the one that's on the 26 gauge wire, and just repeat the same thing. Usually I always try to finish with a layer of 6, just because that's how their buds work. It's layers of 3s and 3s. Come here. So I'll start taping that bad boy on there. So I'll work in 3 and 3. It's going 1, 2, and 3. And then putting on the last layer of 3. And I just love like that, just having them being slightly soft when you're assembling it, like they nest together so much better. And you kind of sit here and play with them and adjust them really easily. And then last one. So like I said in the beginning, you could always do less petals than this. This is a very full, fluffy, frothy peony. I sometimes do them smaller and with less petals. The great thing about this set and all these cutters is it gives you the freedom to do whatever style of peony you want. You could do one with like 10 petals and it will look awesome. So you want to tape it down, and then that's the very last thing I do. I'll sit here and kind of adjust, make them happy. Open it up a little bit if you want to. They don't have to be so tight and nested. You can get them big and airy and light. So ready for dusting. And then just the very last thing I'll do is I'll put a layer of green tape on the stem. I don't worry about calyx when they're open like this. I just find that they break and no one really ever sees them. But if you were doing them for a showpiece, yes, you'd want to put a calyx on the underside. But I usually don't worry about calyxes for wedding cakes. And then you've got your green stem, big fluffy frothy peony. And you see by ombre the Gumpaste, it almost glows in the center. Like, I just think they look really great, and they don't need as much dusting because dusting all those petals can be a pain. But from here, you are ready to do any dusting you want to do, or you can just put it on your cake. But there you go, giant size fluffy peony. The cutters are available on our website, so feel free to check them out and pick one up. And happy flower making, guys.